the kind of protest that the Indian people have been having for the last 400 years is non-participation in anything that they don't believe in. And to try and get them to participate in the usual manner, using usual organizational procedures and that's been proven in other places, just doesn't seem to work, because we've had some experience up there with that.
There's no such thing as usual patterns. Every pattern is just cut to fit the particular situation you've got. There are certain common things, and these are the things that I'm looking for, the common denominator. One thing being that people must want something. And if they don't want it, then you induce the appetite for it. You can't very well want strawberry shortcake if you've never eaten strawberry shortcake, you know. You at least get the flavor and the taste around. And also you start pointing out that other people have so much strawberry shortcake that they throw out half of it. You don't even have any, you know. I mean, you start agitating. That's what's meant by it. But so far I'm trying to find out what you want.
Well,
because when you give me this business
autonomy, I suppose.
Autonomy in which way?
In determining their own life.
Haven't you got it?
No, we don't.
Where don't you have it?
Well, because we happen to have in Canada something called an Indian Act. And that Indian Act determines the kind of roles that we play in Canadian society. And that Indian Act wasn't produced by Indians, but was produced by white people for Indians. Now, under the assumption that Indians were a dying race and that sooner or later there would be no more Indians, so as a protection to them, they developed this act. But now we have a situation in Canada where Indians per capita are the fastest growing group of people in Canada. And the Indian Act now is meaningless to them in terms of what our own future has for us as a people in Canada. And the kind of role that we wish to play in Canada as being determined by something that was produced 100 years ago. And so if you ask what the Indian wants, he wants a change in the Indian Act. But the usual methods that are used to get things changed.
Do Indians generally on a reserve know what the Indian Act is?
Well, let's say they know what effect the Indian Act has on their lives, but they don't in generally know all the language of the Indian Act.
And they know the effect?
Why, sure, because they live under the effects of the Indian Act. It affects their whole lives. The Indian agent is not much different than the warden in a prison. The Indian agent runs and controls their lives on the Indian reservation. And he is given his rules of conduct by a bureaucracy called Indian Affairs, who get their rules of conduct from legislation called the Indian Act. Now, it takes the Canadian people to change an act in Parliament because we have no Indians in Parliament. It's all white people in Parliament. So we have to convince white people to do things for us, and this is where we get balled up. Because it's very difficult to convince the white people to make these changes.
Well, it's very difficult to convince anybody. Matter of fact, I don't know historically. When any people have done that, you're asking us to go do something for you. Why the hell should we? You want it bad enough, why don't you go organize and go fight for it yourself? Then you want to come along and ask us to help you. That's another situation. But while you're sitting on your creative rear end over there fishing and expecting us to go ahead and carry the ball for you, this just doesn't add up.
Well, I
what
think
you're
you
saying is that
interpreted what I said.
But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. With all the difficulties that you're having, from what you've described as the political pattern there, you've got to set the model yourselves first. All that I'm asking is that asking too much is that if this means so much to the people on the reserves, why don't they organize at least around that one issue and start a campaign on that to repeal that act? Now, once you've got that in motion, then you come to the next stage of where you come to these white liberal groups and the others and say, support us on this. Then you go into newspapers and say this. But until, this is a point I was trying to make before, until you have gone off in a leadership I don't mean you personally, I mean the Indian
Well,
people.
don't you see that when the Indian people do this, when they go off on this thing,
Yeah.
then they are automatically opted in to the very things that they don't want to get opted into. In other words, once you take on the trappings of the white man, you become a white man, and they want to retain themselves as Indians, but have the opportunity to be mobile within the country in which is their birthplace.
You're telling me you don't want to get down into the white gutter because you might get some of the crap on you.
Right.
Well, you're going to have to.
Well,
You're not going to sit off there in a cocoon, more or less, and say, these terrible things are being done by these people to us in an Indian Act and so forth. We're not going to go out. In order for us to go out to change this Indian Act, that means that we've got to go out into this world, and we've got to go out in the politicking, and we've got to go out here and all this thing. This means that we're going to get the white man's kind of way of life. Some of it's going to stick around on us because first we've got to learn how to talk to them, and that means that we've got to learn to talk in those values as well. And we don't want to do that. That's going to corrupt us. So we want to stay here, and we want to have those white people over there, wherever they may be. They should go fight for us. That's what you're saying.
When you're home on a reserve and you don't have all of the problems and everything that you have out in the white man's society,
No.
you feel sort of in a sanctuary. You want to remain with that sanctuary, but at the same time you want to be a part and parcel of everything that's happening in the world. And we say that there must be some way, some alternative to us becoming what the white man is, you know, to come in and live with him. In other words, it's not a one-way street, which you're asking the Indian to go down a one-way street, get opted into the system, and then he'll change it and he'll do things that he wants. But what we're saying is that it's a two-way street, and that these guys are going to have to come our way a little bit. We'll come our half, and here we have equality, you know.
Well, they'll come the other half of the way. They're not. White people aren't interested in going to live on a reserve or any of that stuff. You know that.
Well, would you live on a reserve as you see the reserves now?
I wouldn't live on any reserve, a Caucasian reserve, a Jewish reserve, or anything else. But that's the way I'm constituted.
Well, this is, you see, the point we're getting at is that these people have a choice. There is no fence around the reserve. There is no physical barriers in the reserve. All these things, they can walk out of the reserve any damn time they want, any day. But for some reason they don't. They live there and stay there. Are they stupid? Are they lazy? No,
I don't think.
Well, then this is the point. You see, they must.
They've been excited. I don't think they've been. I think the reserve becomes sort of a womb. It becomes sort of a sanctuary.
But the cost is too high, you see. It costs too much for what the white man has to offer, the Indian, in terms of his own personal freedom. The price is too high. And what the Indian is saying a lot of times is lower the price and we'll accept.
You're saying that people have to come out of this. There's no choice. People have to take the crap of what's there.
Very bluntly, I think that the world has changed and is changing by the minute that there is no place left to hide. You've got to be a part of the world.
Yeah, but can you not change this part of the world? Do you have to? Is there no alternative whatsoever?
Oh, you can go out and change it, but you can't change it long distance. You've got to get into it if you're going to make any changes. And this is where, if I seemed a little sharp with you, this is where I reacted with a little emotion, because it's so virtuous to stand back and say, we don't want to change it, this world stinks, and so forth and so on. And we don't want to get involved there because we might smell too. Sure, you're going to smell. But you've got to get over there to, if you're going to make any changes on it. And furthermore, you got to get over there to change, if it's possible, to make the changes over there in order to save what you want to save, because you're not going to save it by remaining in solitary confinement. Well, that's all right. That isn't corruption.
Well, not in terms of what we are as a consumer-oriented people. Always, we weren't a producer people. We didn't produce houses and cars and highways and all sorts of things. Well, in the past, you see, the society wasn't compatible at all to what the Indian believed in. Today, it's becoming more compatible because we have things like guaranteed annual income. We have Medicare. We have old age pension. All sorts of ideas, you know, that are traditional with Indian people. Indian people always had Medicare, and they always had old age pension, and they always had guaranteed annual income for the people. So democracy is another Indian idea. You know, a white man didn't have it till he got here. Well,
in other words, you're buying all of our virtues, but none of our vices.
Right. And we hope that your virtues multiply and your vices become less. And I think that there is a place for Indian people to. Well, is this always necessary, though?
It is necessary. You cannot get change done without power, and power always carries within it, like everything else, an opposite side. Certain negatives on it. Even the simple thing that as we prolong life, we create problems of overpopulation. Things that seemingly are resolutions of ideal problems always carry in their wake another problem. You can't avoid the negatives in life, and you're looking for just the positive.
Well,
and if you choose to avoid the negatives, you're just not going to get any of the positives. You say you don't want to get into the white man's political gutter, you're going to have this Indian Act.
Well, then what good is it then for us to take power for ourselves if it's only going to corrupt us? If we're going to be corrupted like the people who have the power today, then I, for one, don't want that kind of power.
You're not going to be corrupted.
Well, do people...
You're not going to be corrupted. You're going to be alive. You know what you're saying? You're saying, what's the point of your being born since you're going to die someday anyway?
I think I'm saying...
Everything goes together that way. Don't you realize that if you had a world in which there was no sin and no evil, you wouldn't even have the words virtue and good. They'd be utterly meaningless. This is part and parcel of what life is. I don't think you've got what you think you've got. I really don't think you've got it. I think the things that you want to get, the so-called positives, you take it, but instead of calling it being corrupted by white man's operations, you say, well, Medicare was something we always had in the Indian tribes. Social Security we always had in the Indian tribes and so forth. And you take these things and you stitch them. You reach far out for them in a sense. You stitch them into your own culture and you say, these were ours. And the white man developed them in a different form. And we take them. And I think when you say that, and even before you get around to that, when you come down to welfare, that the white man took away our buffaloes, and he corrupted our waters, he robbed us of our lands and so forth, and therefore, instead of our taking welfare from literally being beggars and saying, support us, you know, which is what the situation when you're on welfare. You construct a whole rationale about how since all this has happened, the white man now becomes like nature. What you're really saying, if you really want to talk straight on it, is he robbed us of this stuff. He was a bunch of bastards in doing it to us, and the least he owes us is welfare. And goddamn it, we'll take as much of it as we can get.
What is your particular role or field of work?
That's the first time I've been asked that question in Canada. Going to communities where either economically or politically they've been disenfranchised, the poor, organizing them for power so that they can get their legitimate rights, get their dignity, and get rid of a lot of rationalizations that they've used as an excuse not to get up and fight, pointing out that only that through their own efforts are they going to get things, that there's certain things like equality that no one can give or ever gives to anybody else on the basis of a non-existent altruism or as a charitable act. As a matter of fact, if I give you equality, you don't have it. You only have it by sufferance of the fact that I've given it to you, and if I'm strong enough to give it to you, I'm strong enough to take it away, too, at some point if you don't behave yourself. You get equality when you have the strength to persuade compellingly the ruling powers that be that it's going to be costly not to get the equality. It'll be more costly to them than to withhold it than to agree to it. In that situation, you get it. This has been my function for 20, 25 years through the United States. It's very widely known. And that's all. I'm up here. Film board's doing a movie on the work that we're doing in terms of its ideas, its record. And they schedule this meeting here.
So when you speak in those terms, it sounds quite complicated.
Nothing complicated about it. It's universal for everything from the Eskimos to the people living in Antarctica.
Now, are you speaking of the basic needs of people as people, or basic needs of the society?
In the first place, I don't consider myself or anybody else to be a spokesman for people in terms of their needs, what they want. They're the ones who decide what they want. In the case of our discussion, one of the things when I kept pushing you for something specific was to get rid of the Indian Act. If this is so, and you find out if you're working with a whole group of people, what you call a band here, this is what they want, then on this particular thing, as a professional organizer, the first thing you say is, if this is a number one issue, just assuming for the sake of discussion, that this is their decision. This is a number one issue. Well, obviously, this is a national act. Now, therefore, if you start organizing, say, on the basis of an issue, in a band of 300, 400 people, on some reserve, on the issue of getting rid of the Indian Act, this will not succeed at all, because people have the sense to know that 300, 400 people do not have the power, do not have even the potential of getting a central government to change on this. It's a national thing.
Could you even act even before that? Like,
you would.
Would it be essential, for example, to understand these people and why their situations are such, you know? Why?
Of course you have to understand them. You have to understand why their situation is such, and what their traditions are, what these values are that we've been talking about, etc. But I simply do not accept, I don't accept it not just on the part of the Canadian Indians, I don't accept it on the part of any people, any place in this world, that they choose to be discriminated against, they choose to be literally charitable recipients, rejects, and so forth, that this is what they choose. In other words, the point at issue between us today was really more the developing of a rationale as a justification for it. Because all human beings, you see, no matter what their position in life is, always rationalized. I think what you have is a people that really, it's more a case of their being defeated rather than holding on to these little values that become rationalities rather from rationalization. I think what I would suggest then is I can't believe that in large groups of people that everyone is that defeated. There's always somebody born here and there that has a little spark inside of himself in a fire. Find those individuals. Just fan the flames. Get them to be your little agitators. Get them to start organizing. And you may have to, I would say, from what little I know, and God, I know damn little at this point, but the older generation is absolutely hopeless in this picture. So I would work strictly with the kids and agitate, get the fires burning and start getting little torches here and here and here and here and here, and then go with the action.
In the past, and you know, we think in terms of not so much what we can take, but so much as what we can give. And I think Indians can be organized around the amount that they can give to the white man, not so much around the amount that they can take from him. Because 400 years has already proven that the Indian isn't so inclined toward the white man's society. He hasn't come into it, and he refuses to. But to organize them around things that they can give the white man, and do you think yourself that
what do you mean you're going to organize around things you can give?
We can give them a way of life that is better than the one they got already.
We're not buying that. Forget that. That's being so idealistically unreal that you're out of the world on that.
But I see the hippies are buying it, and I see a whole portion of the youth constituency that are buying it. I hear things now around that are love and...
This is a very minute segment of the whole
it's minute now, but it's a start. It's like what you said about getting a little compromise. It's the start. And from that start, maybe something can happen.
Look, there are things you want. It comes down very simply. Do you want them? If you want them, you have to go out and get them. If you want to go out and get them, there are only certain ways that you go out and get them. If you want to sit around and talk about love, and you want to talk about Christianity, and Christians were talking about love, you know, there were hippies back then. There were more than hippies. They walked into the Colosseum with the lions and the tigers and everything else and died for it, you know, for love. And Father, forgive them, etc. If you want to do it that way, I mean, go ahead. As I told you before, this is the kind of thing that the white society would love to see you do, because they know you're not going anywhere, and it means that they can go on doing what they want without being concerned about making any changes.
You don't
They'd
think
love to see all the
white
Negroes in America living on their reserves.
Well, you know, you seem like a man who has no love or none of these feelings or anything, isn't sensitive.
I have a hell of a lot more love than you have, because I'm willing to go out and get corrupted for it. I'm willing to fight for it. I'm willing to stick my life on the line on it. And you're just willing to stick around and talk about love and hippies and not do a goddamn thing.
Yeah, but that's not true, you see.
The hell it isn't. We wouldn't be talking about it this way.
What do you know about values that we say that are Indian, and those things that are entailed in this whole thing of things that belong to people, their own values, their own culture, and all those things that are built into their way of life, their environment, those things that they feel good about, they feel comfortable.
All I know is what I heard at the luncheon table today, but let me say this to you. I will assume that you have a wonderful set of values to feel comfortable with. My ancestors had a set of values called the 10 Commandments, which they thought that they would feel comfortable with. But in the world as it is, the rest of the people in the world will only let you have as much of your own values as you're strong enough to keep. And you can only get changes as you're strong enough to get them. And as you have the ability to act on it. It is impossible, believe me on this one thing, it is impossible to chart, regardless of what procedure you're using, to chart an orderly plan of organization. In a very disorganized manner in the beginning. But actually, in the beginning, you use the opposition as your main organizer. You literally provoke them into actions against you that will irritate more people and get them moving.
I wouldn't bother to do anything.
You know what your young friend ought to do over there? He ought to organize all the Indian reserves into the hippie movement.
Well, maybe that's what all the Indian reserves want, if they all want that, you know.
The Indian hippies coming out of Canada, this may be the answer.
Well, if that's what they want, it may very well be the answer. I mean, following your own statement, like these people sit down, they say, look, we all want to be hippies.
You'll get the biggest tourist trade, and that'll solve your economic problems.
No, but I mean, look, you're making fun of it.
I'm not making fun. I'm being dead serious. I'm telling you that if you turn the Indian bands into big hippie camps, sort of, so when you have your powwows, there are big love-ins and so forth, you will get the American tourist trade with millions of dollars flowing right in here.
What if they don't want $1 million?
I'll take it.
No, but see, here you are. You're not serious.
You've got to start from where you are. This is the world you're living in. You can't just say, a world of self-interest, I don't want it. I want a world of altruism. A world in which the right things are practically always done for the wrong reasons. This is an immoral world. I don't want that. A world in which there is no such thing as the best. It's always the least worse. I don't want that kind of a world. You can go on and on. This has been the constant business. But you've got to start with the world as it is. You're taking the position of that old story of the guy who's going through the country. He's driving an automobile and he stops and asks a native how to get someplace. So the native gives him a whole set of complicated instructions. And going this way, this way, this way. Finally, the native looks at him and says, but you know, mister, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. Go start from someplace else. When you say that there is a government over there, and the only language they understand is the language of power, of boats, and so forth, and of a changing public climate. Therefore, if I want to get rid of the Indian Act, I have got to mobilize enough opinion, enough political power, and enough sympathetic supporting climate from other parts of Canadian society so that they take a look at it and then they go ahead and change their policy. But in order for me to do this, this means politicking out there. It means lobbying. It means all these things which are so-called corruptive, as you put it,
well, you
from your point of view. That's the way you're going to do it. What are you going to do? Wait for a divine revelation to hit them?
Well, what would you do if you came here to an Indian reserve? What would you do?
I'd say to the people, this is the way it is.
What if they say no? You're going to shoot them?
No, and if they say no, I'd say this is your business. And every people deserve what they want and what they don't, what they're not willing to stand up for.
Well, when you're telling me that you take on the if you want certain kinds of things, you have to take the corruption that goes along with it and all the killing processes and everything that go along with it. And what I'm saying is that there must be a way that we can preserve the things that we want, and if that means preserving the spiritual nature of ourselves, that how is it that we can't have that and have the other things also?
I'm not saying you can't have some of those things. I don't think anybody ever gets seduced who doesn't want to be seduced to begin with. I don't think there are certain moral values that you carry out from childhood, even if you're some religious ideas that you have out of your own background and a certain identification with an ethnic group or with a racial group, whatever that may be. But I'm saying that you cannot move into the world on some kind of a purist thing that you're looking for, because no such thing has ever been known to mankind. You think that automobiles, pool tables, just a real symbol of corruption, incidentally, in white society. You think all this stuff around here is that you're staying out of white society? You talk with me, which the establishment regards as one of the most corruptive individuals, and how you go about getting change, because they don't want change. The establishment would be all for you.
I'm not on the side of the establishment, that's for sure.
Aren't you?
Certainly
You're the
not.
goddamnedest best ally the establishment has when you take a position that you don't want to communicate with them in the only terms that they understand. They couldn't buy a better ally, you know? You want to sit here.
Then you're condemning it right there.
And you're making a judgment about that, too.
I'm not making a judgment, I'm just walking away. Sure, I make a judgment about it in my personal judgment. Everybody makes. You're going to make a personal judgment on me.
Okay, granted, all this is beautiful. You know, I feel that way about what people need, what people want, and I say, well, let's see how we can achieve this. You know,
No.
or and then they say we don't feel we can achieve it this way. Could we look for other means?
Well, you see, what I would be banging on them is, all right, let's look for other means. Let's look for other means. I'll tell you what I'll do with you. How long do you want to look? A week, 2 weeks? You want me to live here with you for a week or 2 weeks? And we'll talk every day on other means? Let's do that. But I'm telling you right now, at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to come out with no other means. Then what are you going to do?
Then you're not sincerely trying to look for other means.
Oh, shit.
Because you have a pre-conclusion.
I've got a pre-conclusion on it. You know, that's crap. You're just making
No, it
up
isn't
words.
crap.
Oh,
You said after 2 weeks
well,
we're going to come out with this.
Look, I've been in it for 25 years. If there were any other means, I think I'd know them. What the hell do you think I'm going to do? Have a revelation in the next 2 weeks that's suddenly going to flash something?
Well, why not?
I don't know anybody.
You know, I mean, why not? Just let's ask why not.
All right.
I mean, these people, I mean, you're superior to these people you're going to talk to completely. For 2 weeks you're going to talk to them, but you know the conclusions you're going to arrive at. These people don't mean a darn thing because you're going to tell them what it is. You say you're going to talk to you for 2 weeks, but I know how our conclusion is going to come out anyway.
Look, this is the most semantical perversion I've hit in a long time up here, and I've had a number of them, because you know what you're saying is not relevant to this at all. Let's put it in your terms, then. I will sit with you for 2 weeks. We will try to find an alternative. What if we don't? What are you going to do then? And put it to you on that basis.